Up to the very beginning of Samach Vav Amud Aleph, but the Gemara over here is a bit of a hemshech to what I said yesterday. If you remember, what I said yesterday was like this: there's two psukim. Two psukim are regarding grasshoppers. As zeh teichelu b'kol sheretz ha'oif ha'hoilech al arba ashaloi karoyim. This is what you could eat anytime it has jumping legs. Okay, that's pasuk chaf aleph, and then the next pasuk it says es elu mehem teichelu. But what specifically? It's a arba leminoi, it's a slam lemineu, it's a chargal lemineu, it's a chagav lemineu. The Tana Kama believes that these two psukim is a klal and then a prat. The entire second pasuk is a salam lemineu, it's a chagav lemineu, it's a chargal lemineu. It's all pratim. So therefore, it's a klal and a prat. Ein b'chal masher b'prat. Very, very specific, which is we only include grasshoppers that share all four characteristics, like the four listed in the pasuk, and it has to also look like them. So the one the Gemara is going to point out, the one glaring thing that's not included is a grasshopper that has a long head. Because grasshoppers that are bald, some of them are bald, some of them have tails, some of them have tails. But the long head is not included in the pasuk. Comes time to Rabbi Shmuel and he says, no, this second pasuk is not just a prat. It's a chargol is a prat, lemineu is a klal. It's a salm is a prat, lemineu is a klal. So it's a klal prat to klal prat to klal, more inclusive. And we said one of them is entirely extra. The salam is extra to tell you long head. So that would be the difference. If it's a klal and a prat, then it's not inclusive. There's nothing extra, so it's not going to include anything other than those four, or items that are grasshoppers that are almost identical. The second opinion is more inclusive, which allows him to have an extra one, because he's so inclusive, he includes all the categories, which allows salam to be extra, salam being extra to include a long-headed grasshopper. So the Gemara just speaks it out. What is the practical difference between these two opinions? Whether it's a klal and a prat, or a klal prat to klal. So the Gemara says, the difference is this long-headed grasshopper, like we just got finished saying. The first opinion, Savar. Asher loy kroim klal, arba sloim chargol v'chagav minei prat, klalu prat, im b'chlal masher b'frat, minei in dilav minei loy. It's a klal and a prat, and therefore it's only inclusive of things that are almost identical to the prat, which does not include long-headed grasshoppers. And it's only inclusive of things that are like it in two categories as in kashrus, the four signs of kashrus, and also physical appearance. Tan the Rabbi Shmuel Savar, no. Ashaloi Karaim is klal. Arba salam chargol chagav prat. Lemineu choser v'klal. Klalu pratu klal. Yatadan el prat. Umarbi kol dedami le bechad sad. It includes all of it, even ones that are not comparable when it comes to the head. It includes all things that have the four signs of kashrus, and therefore a long-headed grasshopper would be kosher according to the second opinion. Okay, the Gemara speaks it out. Now the Gemara says like this: according to Tan Rabbi Shmuel, it's a klal prat to klal. What's interesting is the first klal and the second klal are not the same. It says the Gemara, haloi dami klal kama l'klal basra, but the first klal and the second klal are not the same. How so? The first klal, what is the pasuk? It says achazet teichelu. What does the pasuk say? Anything that has two jumping legs you could eat. That's the first klal. Now that klal is it includes anything that has the jumping legs. The second klal, which is limineu, which is it has to be like those four, which has all four signs of kashrus. So the two psukim are definitely klalim, but they're not exactly the same. The first one is a little bit more generalistic, because the first one doesn't list all the four signs of kashrus, it just lists the two jumping legs, and it says that you could eat, which implies super klal. And then the second one is limineu, similar to the other four. So the Gemara just points out that the two klals, they're generalizing, but they're not the same expansiveness of the generalization. So it says the Gemara, the first one is just mentioning regarding the jumping legs, and but the second klal says limineu, which means it has to be similar in all four simanim. So the Gemara answers, the answer is Rabbi Shmuel doesn't care. He doesn't care that the two klals are not the same. He believes that it could be a klal prat to klal, even though they're not identical. As long as they're two generalizations, that's fine.
Identical means the two klals?
Yeah, as long as they're both klals, as long as they're both non-specifications, that's fine. They don't have to be the same.
We don't have this by the other Tanakh because he only says one klal.
Correct. But Tan Rabbi Shmuel, it's two klalim, they're not the same. He doesn't care. And the Gemara says, Udamrin and Ba'alma, and the truth is, throughout Shas, we have this rule that Tan Rabbi Shmuel is not bothered by two klal of a klal prat to klal not being the same, and the source is this Gemara. And the Gemara says, this is actually the source of Tana Rabbi Shmuel Shita, that throughout Shas, he's pretty chill of how he darshins Klal U'Prat Klal. Okay, Amr Mar. Now the Gemara just has one quick point from yesterday's daf. Again, it's a little bit hard to throw yourself back into like in the middle of the drushes. But if you remember yesterday's daf, Tana Rabbi Shmuel went through how it's a Klal U'Prat Klal, okay, and how he went through the first one is to include ones that are not bald. The second one is to include ones that are bald. The third one is to include that have a tail. The fourth one is extra. The fourth one is that it have to have the name Chagav, so crickets are out. And then the Gemara said, well, if all that matters is the name Chagav, just having the name grasshopper, maybe if it's called a grasshopper, it should be kosher if it has no simane kashrus. And the Gemara says, no, Chagav, to tell you that it has to have simane kashrus. Okay. What was the Havamina for a second? The Havamina for a second is that as long as it's called the grasshopper, it's kosher, even if it does not have any simane kashrus. That was a Havamina for a second. Let me ask you a question. The Torah lists different species. It lists the slum, it lists the chargol, it lists the chagav, it lists all these, all these categories. So you're telling me that after listing all these categories that have all four simane kashrus, the Gemara would just throw that away? Right? What was the Havamin at the very end? The Havamin is, well, maybe if it's just called a grasshopper, that's enough. But then why would the Torah list all of them? The rules of Klal U'Prat Klal is that the prat is still important. The prat are different types of grasshoppers that have four simane kashrus. How could why would the Gemara why would the Torah just throw those out? So the Gemara says, Amar Mar, Ish Chagav. We said this in the Brisa yesterday. Maybe if the name is a grasshopper, Yachol Ein By Kol Simanim Halalu. Maybe it doesn't need to have any simane kashrus. Talmud Loimer Limineu knows that it has to be like the other four. Says the Gemara. Actually, kol simanim halalu has to have the four simanei kashrus. Says the Gemara, ein by kol simanim halalu mehechatesa. Why would I think that it would be enough? Arba v'chargol ksiv. But doesn't the pasuk list different types of grasshoppers that have those simanei kashrus? So where would I get this from? Why would I throw all that away? So the Gemara says, I'll tell you why. If you remember yesterday's daf, we said that the salam is extra. It's completely extra to include grasshoppers that have long heads. So the Gemara's Havamina is, maybe if the salam is extra to include grasshoppers and long legs, and long heads, maybe it's also to include grasshoppers that have no simane kashrus. So it's not just coming out of nowhere, it's we have an extra word. So once we have an extra word that's inclusive, where does it stop? That's where it comes from. The Gemara normally would not just say, by a klal u'prat klal, maybe I don't need any of the details of the prat. But over here, because the salam is extra to include a long-headed grasshopper, the Gemara just thought, well, maybe you could take it a step further. Maybe it should include all grasshoppers that are called grasshoppers, even if they have an osimane kashrus. At least, my point is, at least it's a little bit better because it's basing off an extra word. So says the Gemara, Iloik siv salam kidika amrit. Hashidich siv salam, the word salam is extra, larabuye roish arach, to include a long-headed grasshopper. Ema, Rabbi nami called dehu, so maybe it should include a grasshopper that has no simane kashrus, but it's called a grasshopper. Kamash molan. Okay, now one last point to finish up the whole grasshopper thing. If you remember, the very beginning of the Brisa, the Gemara had that there's four words. There's Arba, Salam, Chargol, and Chagav. So the Gemara started off by the first Brisa. Before we got to Tana Rabbi Shmuel's Brisa, we said, in Arba Zegavoy, Tana Rabbi Shmuel agrees, Salam ze Roshon, Charga ze Nipol, and Chagav ze Gideon. The Tana Rabbi Shmuel said, Arba Zegavoy, that's the same. And then it said, Salam, what was it? The Gemara says, Maishna hasam dekamrit, Salam zerashon, charga zanipol, Maishna hachad amrit, Salam zanipol, charga zerashon. They flip it. Tana Rabbi Yishmael and the previous Brisa flip whether Salam, chargel is a nipol and Salam is a rashon, or the opposite. So the Gemara just wants to know why that is. So the Gemara answers, Marki Aser, Marki Aser. The answer is, it's just in different locations they have different names for it. In Tana Rabbi Shmuel's location, the Salam was the Rashon, and the Chargel was the Nipol, and the opposite, the other Brisa, was just different locales had different names for the... Okay. New topic, and now we're going back to now we're going to fish. Fish, the Simane Kashrus are fins and scales. Says the Gemara... Tana Rabbanon, ein lo yachshav. Let's say a fish does not have fins and scales now. Meaning when a fish is born, let's say you have a type of species that's born without fins and scales. But as it develops, it will develop fins and scales. Kigoin, Hasuluntanis and Afyon. The sultanis and the afyon are types of fish that are, when they're small, they don't have fins and scales, like they're like tadpoles. But as they get bigger, they develop fins and scales. How do I know that that's kosher? Harei zamuter. I'm sorry, zamuter, that's kosher. Opposite, what about a fish that starts off with fins and scales, but as it gets older, the scales fall off? Yesh le'achshav ve'osid ashiron b'shasha olam min haymayim. What about the opposite, a fish that's born with fins and scales? But as it gets older, the scales fall off. Keep going, go to the next page. Akunis, afunis, kaspitonis, achspitonis, and atunis. Atunis sounds like a tuna. Atunis, maybe it's a tuna. Persian names of the fish. No, note that Rashi gives the old French tunina as this translate for tunis. Okay, maybe tuna. Okay, so basically, as they get older, the scales fall off. How do I know that that's still kosher? I'm sorry, not a source, but the Bryce tells me that's also kosher. I mean, as long as it has fins and scales at some point in its life, that's enough. Okay, now the truth is, this is a bit misconception. It's not really fins and scales. It's scales. Fins don't really matter. Because fins don't tell you that it's kosher. Sharks have fins. Every fish that has scales has fins. Not every. Oh, so I'm going to ask it. Tanan hasam kol sheyesh le kaskeses. Any fish that has scales, yesh le snafir, has a fin. But yesh le snafir ve'en le kaskeses. But some fish have fins without scales. In other words, you can have a shark that has fins without scales. It's not kosher. But there's no fish that has scales that doesn't have a fin. And that's why, by the way, for simani kashrus, you'll see like they'll have like a. Ari was telling me that when he worked in a tuna. He worked in a sushi place. They would bring in fish, and they would have a piece of the swatch of the skin still attached, and to have scales still on it. They never leave the fin on. They always look for scales, because the fins is sort of irrelevant. So the Gemara asks the kasha, the obvious question, what you just said. So why mention fins? So says the Gemara, yesh lekaskas yesh lenafir, tak tahar yesh lesnafir ve'en kaskas tak tameh. So michli askaskas is kasamina. So the only thing that really matters is scales. So don't mention fins. Why does Hashem mention fins? Just mention kaskesas. So the Gemara answer is very simple. You only know what kaskesas are because there's two words. If there was just kaskesas and not snafir, I would think kaskesas are fins. I only know that kaskesas are scales because there's the word snafir. So once I know the word, there's two words, fins and scales. I don't know which one is which. I need both to tell me that kaskesas is scales. If the Torah just wrote kaskesas, I would think that means fins.
But how do you know kaskesas doesn't mean fins and it doesn't mean scales? That's the revelation.
Okay, so the Gemara is going to get to that. That the real truth is the word kaskesas means scales, not from Torah but from Nach. There's a revelation in Nach that the word kaskesas is like a clothing, is like an iron clothing. So kaskesas means scales. So we're back to the original question. Yeah. Okay, so the Gemara is going to get there. The Gemara says, if the Torah had just written scales, kaskesas, and not snafir, havamina, my kaskesas snafir, I would think kaskesas actually means a fin. I feel like don't and I would be able to eat a shark. Kasarachmana snafir v'kaskesas. Therefore, the Torah has to say both. So by both, I sort of just by process of elimination, meaning at this point in the Gemara, it sounds like snafir and kaskesas. I don't know what either mean. I just know that when I have both, one's a fins and one's a scale. That's not true. The kaskesas actually means a scale. So how do I know kaskesas means a scale? So says the Gemara, wait a minute. Your question, how do you know the kaskesas means scales? Maybe it means fins, and maybe snafir means scales. So what's the answer? This is a pasuk in Shmuel. V'shiryon kaskasim hu lavish, that he was wearing a coat of iron, kaskasim. So you see the word kaskasim means scales. So back to the original question. Back to the original question. I know what kaskesas means based on a pasuk in Shmuel. I know that all that matters is scales, not fins. So why does the Torah have to write both? So Gemara has a very interesting answer. You know what that means? That means that sometimes the Torah just wants to clarify things. If the Torah had just written kaskesas, here's the way you would have to figure out what it means. You would say it's either fins or scales, because those are the characteristics of fish. You would have to have someone in your shul who's a Baki in Shmuel come forward and say, well, the same shorish is found by Shmuel with a coat of iron with shoal. It must be, it means scales. The Torah wants to make it simple for fishermen. It makes it simple for us. And let me just speak it up. Now, why the Torah doesn't do that in other places, I don't sure. But over here, Yagdil Torah v'Yader, let there be more Torah. Just let it spread forth. The Torah wants to make it simple. If the Torah would have just written kaskesas, it would mean scales, but you would have to know a pasuk in Shmuel's Shirish to figure that out. The Torah wants to have Rachmanis on us. So we appreciate that. It says the Gemara Vayter. Okay, one quick point. Let me read you the two psukim by fins and scales, and you'll see what the Gemara means. The pasuk says, this is a pasuk in Vayikra, Perek Yud Aleph, pasuk Tes. Ez zeh tochlu, this is what you should eat. Mikol asher b'mayim, anything that's in the water. Kol asher yesh lo snafi v'kaskesas. Next pasuk, v'chol asher ein lo snafi v'kaskesas, don't eat. Achez lo techelu. So the Torah has to tell you what to eat, and then tells you what not to eat. What do I need both? If you tell me to eat fins and scales, I'll know not to eat fish that don't have fins and scales. So why does the pasuk have to say kol asher teichelu snafi v'kaskesas? Ves elo lo teichelu asher ein lo snafi v'kaskesas. It's extra. So the Gemara answers, it's just to give it a lav and a aseh and a los aseh. Because if it didn't have both, it would just be an aseh. And the Torah spoke it out because it wanted to be that if you eat a lobster, you over an aseh and a los aseh. Okay. Says the Gemara, huh? Well, you mevatel an aseh. Oh, so you're right. It's a lois aseh, and when you eat, it's mevatel an aseh. It's mevatel an aseh, I guess. Oh, interesting. Is it ever a mevatel an aseh?
I don't think you'd be saying it twice because it's...
Are you mekayim a mitzvah aseh when you have tuna fish?
According to this, yes.
Interesting. Well, we'll get to in a second.
It's not for like to say it twice for the one for the love, one for the like the.
So Rashi says that if you were to eat a lobster, you'd be mevatel an aseh.
And that means that every time you eat kosher fish,
One who violates it by eating a fish that lacks a fins and scale is deemed to have transgressed a positive commandment. It's mevatel an aseh.
Which means also every time you eat fish, you are.
I don't know if you're mekayim an aseh. You're just not mevatel an aseh. Interesting. You're mekayim an aseh. I don't know. So the Gemara just speaks it out. Tan Rabbanon. We got to check that. I got to check that up. Are you?
One for the log, one for the.
I don't know. According to this, are you mekayim mitzvah aseh deraisa when you eat fish? I don't think so. I just think you're mevatel an aseh when you eat lobster. Maybe I'm a half glass, half empty kind of guy, but I don't know. I don't know.
Put on tefillin. If you don't, you're.
So he says, "Tan Rabbanan Masha shenemar achol sheyesh loy shemani al toichal she'ein loy Masha shemal toichal she'ein loy shemani al eichal masha yesh loy." I know the asay and I asay. I know the positive and the negative. So why does the pasuk have to say both? Lama shanon la'avar lo asay v'los asay. So that if you eat a lobster, you're over los asay and mevatel an asay. Now, this next Gemara, I'll do this fairly quickly. This is mamish so fascinating. If you do this Gemara well, you will now be able to read Rav Belsky's tshuva about the bugs in the water, and it'll make a lot of sense. What people do not realize is that not all bugs are usher. We had this in Daf Yomi about 2 weeks ago, that bugs that generated in something detached, like a fruit, detached from the ground, is mutter. But there's another type of bug. The Gemara understands as follows. Let me read you the pasuk. I'll say all this outside, and the Gemara will flow very, very easily. The pasuk says, "Ezet toichlu mikol asher b'mayim." Anything that's in the water. This is what you need for all aquatic creatures. Kol asher yesh lo snafi v'kaskesas. It needs fins and scales. Okay. What type of water does it need fins and scales? B'mayim, b'yamim, u'bencholim. In the oceans and seas and rivers. Meaning, the implication is, how do I know that I'm not allowed to eat a bug from the water? A bug that's in the water. Because it doesn't have fins and scales. Right? If you have a crustacean or a little worm or a little bug that's in the water, I'm not talking about a fly that lands in the water. I'm talking a bug that's in the water, that was generated in the water. The reason why I can't eat it is because it doesn't have fins and scales. And the pasuk says everything that's generated from the water needs fins and scales. The pasuk specifically says what type of water requires that all the items inside have fins and scales? Rivers, oceans, and seas. But if you have a bucket of water, a kalim, and something is germinated inside that water, you could eat it, even if there are bugs. This was, by the way, Rav Belsky's yesod, that he felt that, as we'll see, so basically there's 3 different types of waters. There's oceans and seas. The Torah asks all bugs in there because they don't have fins and scales. Now, oceans and seas are natural moving waters. Then you have the opposite extreme, which is a bucket of water, a kalim. No shaykhs to the ocean stream. It's not moving. It's not in its natural state. That's allowed. The Gemara is also going to darshan that we include bayris and bayris shichan and bayris, which is water that's gathered in a pit. So it's not a lake, because a lake is considered moving, but like a well. The Gemara looks like a well, but not a well of natural spring water. Like basically, you dig out a pit, and then just gathered stagnant water. That's also permitted. What's usher is all living, moving waters. Oceans, seas, rivers, and the Gemara is also going to darshan ne'itzin and charitzin, ponds and canals. That's when it's a problem. That's what the Gemara is going to conclusion. So that's what you have to know for the rest of the daf, that water, bugs that are created in pits, in kalim, you could drink. They don't have fins and scales. They're not, because you'll say, well, you can't eat bugs. I would ask you, well, what's the source? You'll say, hasheretz al ha'aretz. These are not aretz. These are water. So you'll say, okay, well, fins and scales. You don't need fins and scales, only except for bayamim ubanachalim. So technically, bugs that are generated in a bucket of water is permitted. Now, how do they generate a bucket of water? A fly probably landed in there and made a larva, I would assume, but whatever. It doesn't matter. It's mutter. Rebelsky's whole shita is that the canals, the cisterns that bring the New York water, has a din of bayris, shichan, and mayris. So even if there are bugs there, it's mutter. Now it's hard to give that shir because if you're not holding in this daf, but now after you do this daf, read the article online about the copepods and Rebelsky shita. This is what it is. So Rebelsky, first of all, questioned whether there are bugs in the water. He questioned even if there are bugs, maybe they're too small to be halachically bugs. But even if they're big enough, they're from bayris, shichan, and mayris, which the Gemara will now, over the next 2 minutes, will say is mutter. This is the background of Rebelsky shita.
Rebelsky, there's no way they can be like transported into that water.
Yeah, but he says that you're only identifying them for the first time in those areas.
They're always from there. We just don't know.
I mean, any time, right? If you have a bucket of water, the Gemara says is mutter. Well, that bucket obviously came from some water. So what's the answer? I didn't see them until it's placed. It's mutter. That's Rebelsky shita. Let's see it inside. Is it supposed to rain?
Yeah.
No. All right, I'll be on the road. Right, we have two parts of the pasuk. There's the positive and the negative. Just like when it's the first part of the pasuk, as we'll see in a moment, you're allowed to eat bugs that are developed in kalim. So to the loisa say does not apply to bugs that are in kalim, meaning whatever positive and negative are the same. Mutter in kalim, mutter in kalim. How do I know to include bugs that were developed in water that's stored in pits, ditches, and caves? Now that is water that is gathered together. It has a natural source, but it's not moving anymore. Man, you could drink it. Don't have to filter it. Good to go. There's no halachic problem. No problem. Now, heichan hitta b'kelim. How do you know that kelim are permitted? The chsiv ezet teichlu mikol asher b'mayim. The pasuk says b'mayim b'yamim b'ancholim. Then it needs to be snafir v'kaskesas. B'yam b'cholim hu diis le'echol deles le'teichol dafka. Water that's from the seas and the streams. That's when you need fins and scales. Ha b'kelim, but water that's in kalim, afagav delesla, even if it doesn't have fins and scales, achol, you're allowed to eat it. That's the source. Now the Gemara just says, Ema b'kelim afagav deisla loy teichel. Maybe it's that. Yes, the pasuk implies that there's a difference between water gathered in kalim and water gathered in beyamim banchalim. You're telling me that yam and chalim is you can't eat bugs, but kalim you could. Maybe the opposite. Maybe in kalim you can't even eat fish that have fins and scales. Now, I get they're different, but you're saying kalim are more permissible. Maybe kalim is the opposite. Maybe kalim are super strict. But you can't even eat fins and scales. You can't even eat a tuna that's in a kli. You put a tuna in a kli, whatever. Maybe that's aser. You're saying they're different. So it says the Gemara, loy sal kadach. No, can't be. T'chsiv v'chol asher, ein loy snafi v'kaskes b'yam v'cholim v'kol asher asher tzor ma'ayim. B'yam v'cholim deles loy teichel, ha'b'kelim ha'fagad deles loy teichel. The implication of the pasuk is that it's only an issue by yam and cholim, but if it's not yam and cholim, it's permissible as long as it has fins and scales. The Gemara just says ve'ema b'mayim klal. Now, so what are we including? We're including in the isser of bugs streams, oceans, rivers, that's the pasuk. We're excluding kalim. And we're excluding what's permissible is kalim and pits. Says the Gemara, but what's also aser? So again, oceans, yam and chalim, and we're also including ponds and canals, because ponds and canals are natural spring water. Says the Gemara, I should make a drasha that ponds and canals are also permissible. Ema b'mayim klal, b'yam and chalim prat. Maybe it's a klal and a prat. Ema klal masha b'prat, yam and chalim in, ne'itzim charitzim loy. Maybe it's a klal and a prat, and it's to exclude ne'itzim charitzim. Meaning maybe even waters in a natural well or natural bubbling, brooks should also be permissible because there's a klal and a prat. And the only thing the Torah mentions is the oceans and rivers. Maybe anything else is permissible. So it says, Nitzin charitzim are ponds and canals, natural ponds and canals, which is a problem. The Gemara says maybe it shouldn't be a problem. Maybe it should only be a problem if it's in the oceans and rivers. So it says the Gemara, I'll tell you the problem. You're saying it's a klal and a prat. It's not, because there's another word, b'mayim klal. So it's a klal, a prat, and a klal. What's the klal, prat, and klal to include? More inclusive. It's inclusive of the issue of bugs with oceans, rivers, and all natural spring water. So even a pond and even a bubbling brook or even a canal, natural spring water moving spring water is a problem. Says the Gemara, wait a minute. So you're telling me it's a klal, prat, and klal, but I'll just read you the pasuk. It says b'mayim, kol b'mayim, one klal, kol b'mayim, a second klal, b'yam n'chalim. It's the two klals are before the prat. It's b'mayim, b'yam n'chalim. So is that an issue? You tell me it's a klal, prat, klal, but it's klal, prat. So the Gemara says that's fine. Klal, prat, klal does not have to be in that order. It could be klal, prat. That's fine. Says the Gemara, hare trei klali desamchi la'adal dininu, but isn't it a klal, prat? The Gemara says, Amaravina kedamri ma'arav. We say in Eretz Yisrael, kamakam shatamayta shne klal smuchim zelazah. Anytime you have two klals next to each other, hitl prat b'neim v'dainim klal, prat, klal. You could just take the prat and put it in the middle, and that works. So now let's just do the klal, prat, klal. Again, the prat in the Torah is oceans and rivers and seas, and the klal, prat, klal is to include the isser of bugs to even canals and natural springs. The Gemara says, "B'mayim klal, b'yam n'cholim prat, b'mayim chazer kol, klal, prat, klal, yin n'chol prat, ma'afrat mefurish mayim noivim." Just like the prat is natural spring water, af kol mayim noivim. So to any moving natural water, ma'iravi charitzin ne'itzin lisur, that includes canals and ponds, u'maymiit, and what's excluded and permissible, ba'yirish shichin ma'yiris latera. Pits, ditches, and caves. Now the Gemara just says one more thing. The Gemara says, "Ema mahaprat meforish ma'im godlin al gabe karka, av kol ma'im godlin al gabe karka, my ravi afilu barishichan ma'aris lisura." The Gemara says maybe it's not just to include natural waters. Maybe it's to include any gathered water, any water that's above ground. So if I have an above ground pond that's not moving, that I gathered, it should be aser because I should include all above ground water, even non-spring, even non-moving, to the Isser. The Gemara says, Im kain teichlu me'ahanale. Then what do you do with the extra word teichlu? The extra word teichlu is to tell you that is permissible. So therefore the conclusion is, the Isser applies to oceans, rivers, and we're including canals and ponds and springs. And what it's excluded and what's permissible is kalim and any gathered water, even if it's above ground, that's going to be permissible to eat bugs out of. All right, we'll stop.